Hello class. Today we're going to talk about topic 4-2. We're going to go back and talk about what was last lesson 4-1 and come up with some very specific things that we know if we have parallel lines. Now if you'll notice, the first page of this packet is a sheet of figure 1 and figure 2. We're going to keep on referring back to those, so you may want to go ahead and tear this page so that you can look better. You may be flipping back and forth. Now for the lesson, what I've done is I have cut out figures 1 and 2 so that I can refer back to them. First off, we're going to be talking about figure number 1. So in figure number 1, I want you to notice that we have parallel lines. So everything that we do involving figure 1 is true for parallel lines. Now, we look at angles 1 and 5, 1 and 5, and talking about yesterday, topic 4-1, we want to know how 1 and 5 are related. Well, they're both in the top left of their respective group, so this is a pair of corresponding angles. I'm going to go ahead and fill out this whole section and then come back. Angles 1 and 4. These are angles that we've talked about. You've been using proofs involving these. These are vertical angles. Well, angles 1 and 3. It's another one that we've been doing proofs on. 1 and 3, they form a line, so that makes a linear pair. 1 and 8. We talked about angles 1 and 8. 1 and 8, they are alternate sides of the line, exterior to the two parallel lines. So these are alternate, exterior angles. And then 1 and 7. Well, 1 and 7 are same side, but they are still exterior angles because they're outside of the parallel lines. Now, here we say trace. What we're going to do is, instead of tracing, we're just going to look very carefully. Angles 1 and 5. And actually, I think I will go ahead and trace. My piece of paper. I'm going to trace angle 1. And when I compare it side by side to number 5, I notice that they are the same angle. Okay, because they're the same angle, yes, they are congruent. Are they supplements? Well, that would mean they would have to add up to 180, because angle 1 is obtuse and so is 5. They're not going to be supplement, so it would be a no. Now we look at 1 and 4. I don't even need to trace it. We know that vertical angles are always congruent. That's the vertical angle theorem that we've been using. And no, they're not going to be supplements. 1 and 3 make a linear pair, and we know from the linear pair theorem that these are supplementary. And if we look at them, this one is obtuse, this one is acute. They are definitely not congruent. Now 1 and 8. Now I want you to notice that 1 and 5 were congruent, and 8 is vertical to 5. Well, that would mean that 8 and 1 are also congruent by the transitive property. And no, they're not supplementary. And then 1 and 7. Well, 1 and 3 made a linear pair. 5 and 7 make a linear pair. 1 and 5 were congruent. So by the transitive property, 1 and 7, 3 and 7 must be the same. So 1 and 7 must be supplementary. Now, this one says to trace angle 3 and compare the following. Well, angle 3 and 5, 3 and 5, they are same side, but this time they are on the interior. 3 and 6 are alternate sides, also interior. With look at 3 and 5, we can tell that these are definitely not congruent. And 3 and 5 are, in fact, supplementary. Okay, I can go through the rules for why that is, but 1 is congruent to 5. Those are, okay, and 1 and 3 were supplementary, means that 3 and 5 are also supplementary. Now if we look at angles 3 and 6, okay, they are not supplementary, but they are going to be congruent. So we've got this top half of the table and the bottom half of the table, and we want to list which ones were congruent. We can go back through them and we can say that the corresponding angles were congruent. The vertical angles were congruent. The alternate exterior were congruent. And the alternate interior were congruent. Now if you go back through your list, listing the ones that were supplementary, we know that linear pair are supplementary. Same side exterior are supplementary. And same side interior were supplementary. Now, this is true for parallel lines. Let's go ahead and look at lines that are not parallel. Now we're dealing with figure 2. So, let's take a look. 1 and 5, they're still top left angles. They are still corresponding. 1 and 4 are still vertical. 1 and 3, they still make a linear pair. 1 and 8, they are still alternate exterior. And 1 and 7 are still alternate interior. Now, let's go ahead and take a look. My angle 1 and my angle 5, I can just look at these and tell they are not congruent. And they're both obtuse, so they are not supplementary. If we take a look at verticals 1 and 4, well, vertical angles are always congruent, but unless they're 90, they are not supplementary. If we look at a linear pair, these are definitely not congruent, but they are always supplementary. Now for the alternate exterior, 1 and 8, well, I can tell that these are both obtuse, so they are not going to be supplementary. and angle 1 is obviously bigger than angle 8. So they are not congruent. Now for my alternate interior, that would be, no, sorry, I mislabeled this one. One and 7, I was getting ahead of myself. They're on the same side and exterior. Kudos to those of y'all who caught the mistake before I did and were wondering about it. Let's go ahead and look at angles 1 and 7. Well, they're obviously not congruent. And they are not supplementary. A supplementary angle would be the same as angle 5, and 3 is definitely not the same size as 1. Well, they're just not going to be supplementary. So we take a look at this table, and the only yeses that we have are here and here. Well, let's look at the interior angles. 3 and 5, they're on the same side and interior. 3 and 6 are on alternate sides and interior. Well, 3 and 5 are definitely not congruent. And that is way too small to be supplementary to that. So they are not supplementary. If we look at 3 and 6, well, 3 is definitely smaller than 6. And they are definitely too small to be supplementary. Notice we have a lot fewer yeses in this pair of tables. So which ones were congruent? Well, the only thing that shows up as congruent is our vertical angles. And the only ones that show up as supplementary is our linear pair. So, when your lines are not congruent, there are a lot less things that we know. Let's go ahead and turn to the next pair. So, in conclusion, figure 1 and 2 are different because figure 1 is parallel, figure 2 not parallel. Which angle pairs are congruent in both figures? Those would be our vertical angles. Which ones are supplementary in both figures? That would be our linear pair. When were other pairs congruent or supplementary? When there were parallel lines. So, if we have parallel lines, then we know a whole lot more about our problem. Let's go ahead and take a look at an example. Here we have angles 1 and angle 5. Well, they are on opposite sides of our transversal. They are exterior to our lines. So these are alternate exterior angles. So we want to tell whether they're congruent or supplementary. Because we have these triangles, we know that these lines are parallel. Therefore, we know that 1 and 5 happen to be congruent. That goes back to our first page, figure 1, where we have alternate exterior angles, and they are congruent. Now let's take a look at 2 and 3. These are parallel, so that means that we can use everything from figure 1 well, 2 and 3, they are on the same side. They are on the inside. That makes them interior angles. And 2 and 3, for figure 1, same side interior, they are supplementary. Now for figure 2. If you would like, you can go ahead and pause the video and see if you can answer these on your own. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and continue working out. We're told that these lines are parallel. So if angle 3 is 115, we want to find angle 5. 3 and 5 are alternate sides, interior angles, and if we were to look back at our sheet, we would find out that these are congruent. So that means that angle 5 is also 115 degrees. I'm going to go ahead and cross off that number so that we can do part B. Now part B says that angle 1 is 130. We want to find angle 7. They're on opposite sides of our transversal, exterior to the parallel lines, alternate exterior, are also congruent, which means that angle 7 also equals 130 degrees. Now for our part C. It says that angle 8 is 47, and we want to find the measure of angle 3. Well, there's no pair relationship between 8 and 3. But I can go 180 minus 47, and that will give me either 5 or 7. That gives me 133 for angle 5. And if I look at angle 5, it is alternate interior to 3, so that those are going to be congruent. So the measure of angle 3 equals 133. Now I also could have done it this way. Well, 7 is also a linear pair with 8, so I know that it's 133 degrees. And these are corresponding, and because they are corresponding, they must be the same. In fact, I can go ahead and label everything based on the relationships that we've talked about. And then I can just glance at an angle and know what its size is. So, this is the meat of the lesson. This is the meat of the unit. Is now that you know the different types of angle pairs, you should be able to determine whether they are congruent or supplementary as long as we have parallel lines. Good luck, and I will see you in class.